Hi, friends, and welcome to the GRiTT podcast. I'm Mary Werdeman, and I'm so excited today to be having a chat with my friend, Mischel Satunis. And so I want to welcome Mischel to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today, Mary.
I'm so glad to have you here. Now, Mischel is a 3-time open heart surgery survivor. She's a health and wellness advocate and speaker. She's a dance enthusiast and a baker extraordinaire. So hopefully we'll get to all of those things because she just wows me, and I'm just excited to have her here. Before we dive in, I just want to set some context around our conversation. So February is the American Association Heart Month, correct, Mischel?
That's correct. Yep. It's National Heart Disease Awareness Month.
National Heart Disease Awareness Month. Okay. Now, we're going to be talking about heart awareness and the fact that it's National Heart Awareness Month, right? So
Correct.
This is the GRiTT podcast, Grief Relief, It Takes Time. But, when we think of grief, we think of bereavement, but grief comes in all kinds of different shapes, sizes, forms. It's, and if anybody, I think if you've been paying attention to 2020, I think by now, many of us are well aware of the fact that there are many, 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 many forms of grief. That grief is in fact the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind. And that's happening for us, often, all the time, every day. And I also believe that grieving and grief in life takes grit. It takes a lot of grit from time to time. And so I believe that so many things about your story will resonate with our listeners because there's a lot of grit in your story. And I'm just, I'm excited to hear it and sit with it and bear witness to it. And I know for me that my journey to date, my grief journey, has opened me up to a life journey. And I can imagine that that thread and that resonates for you as well.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So true.
Great. Well, so our viewers and listeners might gain a better understanding. I think we should kind of go back to the beginning. Like, how do we know each other?
From high school.
Can you believe that? From high school?
Way back in high school. Yep. We grew up in upstate New York, and we lived in this quaint little town called Marcellus, New York. And at the time growing up in it, I didn't think it was the fun place to be or that we were so lucky. But as an adult now, I look back on it and see how blessed we were to live in that quaint little sweet town.
We were. And did you live right in Marcellus?
No, I lived in Howard Hill. Do you know where Howard Hill is? Right off.
I did too. I did too.
You did?
I did. I lived on Beef Street.
Yeah, you were not far from me at all. I lived on Perry Road. If you went down Purple Welch Road, it was to the right-hand side, right after Beeler's Farm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We were right on the cusp of the cutoff, like 2 houses up from there. They went to West Genesee High School. And we just Perry Road just made the cutoff. Everybody that was, I think the Welches were the last family that went to Marcellus. Everybody beyond the Welch house kind of went to West Genesee. So we were just like right there on that cusp of the cutoff line to where we went. So yeah, Howard Hill, not far from you.
Exactly where are you talking about now? That is so funny. Of course, I was a few years ahead of you in high school. And so, yeah.
Yeah, Beef Street. Yeah, I used to ride my bike up there, and when we had horses, we used to ride horses through the pastures up there.
Yeah, we had horses too, and probably those were trails that I've been on. That's awesome. So, tell us about you. Tell us about so what's happened to you between the last time I saw you walking the halls of Marcellus High School?
Well, so much. Well, Yeah, I left school early. I graduated early and got married, and much younger than everybody that we grew up with. I got married when I was 18, married my high school sweetheart, and was married for almost 10 years. We have a daughter who's grown now with her own family, and got a divorce. So I went through the grief of divorce. I think a lot of people who go through that have a different kind of grief when you go through the end of a relationship or a life.
Sure.
And then I was a single mom for like almost 9 years, I think about 9 years, a little over 9 years. And I swore I'd never get married again. And God had other plans for me. And I'm so glad that he did. I met my husband, John, in 1995. And we got married in 1996. We'll be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this fall. And I always say that I had a really difficult childhood. I didn't have my biological father in my life, and for a short time was raised by my biological mother, who was married to a very abusive alcoholic. And I think that affected me in a lot of ways. And I never realized how much it affected me until I was a grown adult, probably in my 40s. And the gravity of that environment, what it carries with it, is really heavy. And I don't think you realize it when you're going through it. I, as a young woman, had an eating disorder in my, like, probably when I was 21, but had not a clue where it came from or why. I certainly know now where it came from and why. But so I got very lucky that I met my husband, who I swear, and I say this all the time, was God's greatest gift to me. I feel like he was my reward for everything that I suffered from my difficult childhood, from not having my biological father in my life, from my insecurities, from a failed marriage, from anything bad that had ever happened to me that I struggled with. I felt like he was my reward for, because I always tease him and tell him that he's like my dream guy. When you're a little girl and you dream about the guy that you'll marry one day, he was all of that for me. He's funny, he's kind, he loves the Lord, he's witty, he's a hard worker, he's a wonderful father to my daughter, he's my best friend, he's the best friend to the neighbor guy, he's the hard worker. He encompasses all of those great things, all of the qualities I would want in someone. He's honest, he's caring, he's kind, he's encouraging. I wish I could be more like him, because he's such a good person. And I tell him that all the time. And he's, he doesn't see him. I don't think any of us see ourselves the way that we are. I think we're just kind of going through life thinking that we're doing the best that we can, and everybody's doing that. But that's not always the case. He's the most unselfish person I've ever met in my life. And him being in my life healed things in me that I just never thought were possible. And I remember early on when we first started dating, he had said to me, I kept trying to sabotage the relationship because I wasn't used to someone opening a car door for me, which, if you think about it, that's kind of sad. And he bought me roses, like, I swear, every week. And I was like, why do you keep buying me flowers? And he said, well, because that's a nice thing to do. Or when he went to open the car door, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I questioned everything. And I also feel bad because I feel like he paid for everything that everybody who came before him. I questioned his motives on everything because I had a lot of trust issues with everything that I had gone through. So when he came along, I think I gave him a run for his money, because I just couldn't conceive of anybody being that good or that kind or that loving or that unselfish. And he was. And I healed a lot that was in me because I learned to trust again in a whole different way. There was no ulterior motive. He wasn't out for anything for himself. He was just out to be happy and live his life. And he wanted me to come along for the ride, and how lucky I was that to have his love, and that God brought him into my life. And I remember and I believe strongly in no coincidences. I believe it's divine intervention. I look back on my life now and I see that so clearly. I remember it was after I had ended a relationship with someone, and because I was married and then I lived with a guy for a few years. And after that relationship was over, I remember thinking to myself that I didn't make good choices in my 2 relationships that I had. And I was going somewhere that day and I was putting my makeup on in the mirror, and I stopped in the middle of putting my makeup on and looked in the mirror and said a prayer out loud to God and just said, I didn't get it right the first time. And I sure didn't get it right the second time. And if I'm meant to be with someone, then you have to bring them to me because I'm not looking for it. And shortly thereafter, everywhere I went, there was John. And the funny thing was, I know a lot of people, and I usually know somebody who knows somebody, and I didn't know anybody who knew him, and which was really strange. And I remember I remember I was sitting at telling a friend about how I was sitting at a red light singing to the radio, and I looked over, and in the car next to me was John singing to his radio. And I got like this, like, that was weird. And then there was a wishing well at Wegmans. They had a wishing well on Route 57 at Wegmans there. And I remember people were tossing coins in. And I remember holding the coin and making a wish and tossing it in and it hitting the water. And then I looked up and across from the wishing well, John was standing there doing the same thing.
Oh, wow.
I kid you not. And so I remember saying this prayer, like, God, you bring me whoever you expect me to be, whoever, if I'm meant to be with someone, you bring them. And then everywhere I went, there he was, like everywhere I went. I was telling the story to one of my best friends. We were on the treadmill at the gym and I'm telling her the story, and I look, and who's running around the circle at Gold's Gym but I go, that's him. I was like, that's the guy. And we laughed about it. And then a few weeks went by and we were at Party in the Plaza. There used to be this thing in Syracuse, downtown Syracuse, they had at the Federal Building where everybody would go like after work. And it was in the Federal Building underneath, like, because it's a raised building underneath. And then they have bands there, and there'd be different charities, sometimes people selling things and whatever. But I remember seeing him there and pointing him out to her. And the weirdest thing happened. She's like, who are you looking at? And I was looking across the street and I said, you see that guy over there in the denim shirt? She's like, yeah. And my girlfriend, she said, what about him? And I said, and I don't even know why I said this, because I don't talk like this. I said, I'm going to marry that guy someday. I don't know how, because I don't know him. I don't know who the hell he is. I said, but I'm going to marry that guy someday. And it's not like me to talk like that. I mean, I don't even know why I said it. And as soon as I said it, I was like, I don't know why I just said that. And then I remember the next day I used to ride my bike 10 miles a day, every other day at Long Branch Park. And he jogged through there. And I was riding my bike, listening to music, and was thinking about all this and how weird the coincidences were, or this, whatever this was. It was just, I thought it was divine intervention. I still think it.
Oh, yeah.
And as I'm thinking it through and playing it in my head, how strange it all is, he jogged right by me. And I got off my bike and I turned around and I watched him jog away. And I looked up and I said, okay, I hear you. Like, okay. I just got this feeling like this is who I've chosen for you, but don't go doing anything. You let me handle it. I felt like it was God's sign to me. And so I left it alone.
Clearly, because he kept showing up.
And so we went to Party in the Plaza the following week, and I was with one of my best friends, and I thought he liked her at first. And I was happy for her because he seemed like a nice guy. And he went to give her his card and she just wasn't interested. She looked at the card and kind of tossed it and walked away, and you could tell he was a little bit embarrassed. And so I picked it up and went, wow, that's a really nice card. I was like, who printed these? Because I felt so bad for him. And I typically don't call guys. I just don't do that. And I just didn't want it to be awkward if we ever saw each other again, especially since we belong to the same gym. And so the next day I emptied out my purse, because when you go to Party in the Plaza, everybody's handing out their business cards. So you go home with your purse or your pockets chock full of everybody's business cards. So I remember dumping my purse out in the trash can, and all of them fell face first into the trash can except for the one, and it was clinging to the side. And I thought, I gotta call this guy and apologize for how my friend acted. I don't want to feel weird or strange if we ever see each other again. So I called him, and he was on his way out of town for a wedding. He was in his best friend's wedding. And he said, here, take my number and call me back. And I said, no, I don't call guys. I was only calling to apologize because I didn't want it to be weird when I saw you again. But thank you anyway. And he said, well, give me your number. And so I gave him my number, thinking that would be the end of it. We'd never have, we wouldn't have a conversation again, and I'd see him and not feel weird. It would be fine. And he called me when he got back, and we would talk on the phone like almost for hours. We talked on the phone, honest to gosh, probably for 3 months before we went on a date.
Wow.
I'm not even kidding you. And then we had to both be up for work at like 7 in the morning, and we would talk on the phone till like 2 in the morning.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, and so we developed this great friendship just from long talks on the phone. And then this one night he just called me up really late out of the blue and was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm baking cookies for my daughter's lunch." And he's like, "Do you want some company?" And I was like, "Okay," because I just thought that was weird because we'd been talking for 3 months and he never asked me out. And he came over and we stayed up talking and looking through photo albums of mine and photo albums of his. And we've been together ever since. And we got engaged like 6 months later. Around the 3 month mark, though, I started feeling like a little bit too comfortable, and I started to feel like gloom and doom because I felt like this is too good to be true. It's not going to last. I was like a nervous Nelly and a doubting Thomas. And I told him, I said, "I'm divorced and I have a daughter, and you've never been married, you've never had children, and I have a lot of baggage." I said, "You really need to go date other girls." And he's like, "Why do you keep trying to sabotage this relationship?" And then he's very smart, my husband. He came to me and he said, "I don't think that these insecurities that you're having have anything at all to do with um, with me." He said, "I think they have to do with everything you've been through." And he said, "Let's go to relationship counseling." And we did for 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months, we got engaged.
Wow.
Yeah. And he is my best and dearest friend. I mean, nobody makes me belly laugh like John. Like, yeah.
That's
If you could hear
important.
it be a fly on the wall in our house, some of the silly songs we, sing to each other. He still leaves me little love notes every day. Everybody at work used to tease me and tell me he was the rose boy. They would call him the rose boy because we had so many roses being delivered to my office from him. He's just very thoughtful and very generous, not just to me, but like to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family, to my daughter, to my son-in-law, to strangers. I remember once at Wegmans, I was at the deli in Wegmans on Route 57, and a guy came up to me and said, "You're John's wife, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "My name's so-and-so, and could you just tell him I said thank you?" And I said, "Sure. Does he know what it's for?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Your husband helped me get a job." He's like, "I lost my job, and he helped me get a new job, and I start today." He's like, "Today's my first day." And I came home and I said to him, "I saw so-and-so at the deli today at Wegmans, and he told me you got him a job." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "How's he doing?" I go, "Great. He was super happy." And I go, "Why didn't you tell me about that?" And he said, "I don't need to tell you about that." He's like, "There's no reason for me to tell you anything about that." And
Wow.
I don't even want to tell you how many times stuff like that's happened where he's gone and helped somebody in the biggest way, and you never hear a peep out of him. I'm not like that. I am ashamed to tell you that if I helped someone get a job, I would be the first person to say, "Oh, I got so-and-so the job over at such and such," without even thinking about it, but he's not that guy. He's done so many really wonderful things like that, that just makes me admire him and to love him more. I want to be more like that. I want to be more like that. He's just a good guy. And when I tell, he's not one, he doesn't see himself that way at all. He's like, "I'm just doing everything that the average nice guy would do." And I said, "Oh, I don't think you are aware of that. There's a lot of self-serving people in the world. There's a lot of people who wouldn't go the extra mile for other people." And it's sad to say, but it's true. It's true. There's not many people like that. I think it's rare.
Well, he's is clearly your rock, and it sounds like you have a beautiful love story. And I'm imagining a wonderful or a that you're grateful for the foundation of that relationship for what was to come. So that was in 1996 or in the mid to late 90s?
We got married in 1996, and at the time we had no idea how serious my heart condition was. And keep in mind, he didn't sign on for that. We had no idea at all what would unfold, what the future really held for us. And I often go back to that day at St. Margaret's Church where we took our vows, where we say in sickness and in health. And I can't tell you how many times with every surgery, like when they're wheeling me into the OR, that memory pops into my brain.
Were
And
you already having symptoms or having issues at that point?
here's the thing. I was born in the 60s, and they didn't have the technology that they have today. And I was born with a heart murmur. And I used to see the little, we had the little town doctor that was right there on Casson Road. We saw Dr. Palmer and Dr. Bluto. Remember them from and I remember they were my pediatrician or family doctor back then, and they said that I was born with a heart murmur, but that it was a functional heart murmur. So I just went on about my life. And I didn't know, as I was growing up, I just assumed everybody got short of breath and dizzy. I didn't know it was just me.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember being very, very aware. I remember we used to get our physicals at the nurse's office from Dr. Daly. Remember that? And I remember Dr. Daly listening to my heart and making me step aside and then telling the nurse to get my mother on the phone and saying to her, I remember standing there and having him overhear him say to her, she has a really profound heart murmur. Have you had it looked at? And I didn't know what a heart murmur, I didn't know. I knew that I had an irregular heartbeat, and I wasn't, astute enough to know what a heart murmur was. I just knew, I thought everybody had one. I didn't know I was different. And then as time went on, I can remember so many times like getting dizzy, being short of breath, not being able to tolerate the heat, and like having palpitations all the time and being winded.
Wow.
It became very, very prevalent in my early 20s, and I started fainting. So I went to see the doctor. He ordered an echocardiogram of my heart. And when the results came back, they said, you have something called mitral valve prolapse. And they basically said, stay hydrated, watch your caffeine, watch your stress, and get 8 hours of sleep. They didn't say anything else. And at that point, they were telling us to pre-medicate with an antibiotic prior to having your teeth cleaned. So that was the only stipulation that I was given. It was, you have to pre-medicate before any sort of dental appointment or surgery or whatever. So I, again, just kind of went on about my life. And as time went on, the symptoms worsened. And I've been very physically fit and very active. I mean, like I said, John and I met in the gym. So suddenly I was having trouble. I don't smoke, by the way. I don't drink. I'm a health nut. I don't, eat fatty foods. I pretty much lead a pretty healthy lifestyle. So I never in a million years thought I was the face of heart disease at all. And so I remember going to the doctor and saying, I'm having palpitations and I'm getting dizzy. And suddenly I'm having a hard time running up the stairs. And I remember the doctor looking right at me and going, oh, you have anxiety. Oh. And I'm like, well, I don't feel anxious. And if it's anxiety, how come I'm only getting it when I'm going up the stairs? Like, why am I not having it sitting in my car? Why am I not having it in the shower, getting ready for work? Or why am I not having it at work? Like, it just didn't make any sense. But I was an uneducated patient. I was not an empowered patient. And I was raised with the belief that doctors take an oath of do no harm. He had all these years of medical school. Certainly he knew more than me. And he prescribed the medication Zoloft. And I took it, and my symptoms continued to get worse. And this went on for 2 years. And when I would go back and say, I don't feel any better, I actually feel worse. Well, that's not the right medication for you. We'll stop that medication, and here, we're going to give you some Prozac. Okay, so I remember this went on for about 2 years. And at the time it started really badly around 36. We hadn't been married that long. And so for 2 years, I was taking all these different medications that the doctor was giving me and beating myself up and saying, you got to push yourself harder. You got to ride your bike a little farther, and you got to clean up your diet just a little bit more. And just kept pushing myself until it got to the point where I couldn't push myself anymore. And I went to see my OBGYN at Community General Hospital. His name is Dr. Myron Luthringer. And I went in for my regular checkup, and I was having some heavy periods at the time, and I was feeling really tired and really run down. And I thought he was going to tell me that I was anemic because of the heavy periods, because I had a history of endometriosis as well. So I remember him coming into the room and me sitting on the examining table with my paper gown on. and him putting the stethoscope in his ears and looking, down at the floor for a minute and putting the stethoscope on my heart. And then immediately his head snapped right around and his eyes were really big. And I thought, well, that's weird. He's never done that before. And then he took the stethoscope out really very seriously and looked at me and said, Michelle, how do you feel? And I said, oh, it's funny that you mention it. I'm really tired. I think I'm anemic from these heavy periods. And he shook his head no, put the stethoscope back in his ears and started listening again. Only this time he listened to my heart unlike any time he had ever listened before. He had me lean to the side. He had me lay back. He had me swallow. He put the stethoscope on my throat, which he had never done before. And then he took the stethoscope off and he started flipping through my chart and he turned around and he matter of fact said to me, when do you see your cardiologist next? I said, I don't see him for 6 months. He said, no, you're going to see him today. And then I became panicked and I said, Dr. Lutheran, you're scaring me. What do you hear? And he said, Michelle, your heart murmur has significantly and profoundly changed. I need you to see a cardiologist right away. He left the room and he went to the office right next door to the room I was in, and I could hear the whole conversation. And he wanted someone to see me that day and they refused to see me. They said, no, it's 4 o'clock. I could hear them. He had them on speakerphone. No, it's 4 o'clock. We're done for the day. And he said, then I want you to see her tomorrow before your first patient. And he came back into the room and he said, I want you to go see your cardiologist tomorrow. They open at 8. I want you there by 7:30. And I went. At 7:30, they did an echo. I sat in the room and waited. The cardiologist came in. He put the echo on the screen because he had it on a disc. And he took his pen and he started pointing on the echo. And he said, that's your mitral valve. And he said, it should be nice and tight like saloon doors. And as the heart contracts and opens and closes, it should be going very uniformly like this. He said, unfortunately, he said the doors are kind of bowed and it's flopping all over the place. Wow. There's no rhythm or rhyme to it. And he said that he turned around and he said, it's time. And I'm like, it's time? Like, it's time for what? Like, what do you mean? And he said, you need to go see a heart surgeon. I go, for what? And he said, you need open heart surgery. You could have pushed me over with a feather. I went to the parking. I mean, I don't even remember anything after that. I remember I started crying. I was so full of fear. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect that diagnosis at 38 and a health nut. So I went to see the heart surgeon, and shortly, just a few days later, I was on an operating table having my first open heart surgery.
Wow.
It was a mitral valve repair. So on July 25th, 2001, I had my first open heart surgery. And I never recovered from that surgery, Mary, and no one believed me. About 6 months after my surgery, my husband, his job transferred us to Tennessee. We lived just outside of Nashville in Tennessee, in a town called Murfreesboro. And I saw every doctor that would see me. We had a 3-year contract to live there. And every day I struggled, and every day it kept getting worse. I was getting dizzy and falling. All I did was sleep all the time. I had no energy. I had trouble breathing. My lips and my fingers were always blue. And whenever I would see a doctor, they would give me a prescription for anti-anxiety or depression medication, and I was instructed to see a psychiatrist. They said my heart was fine. I knew something was going on, but again, pushed myself and believed that they would know more than me. And I was really hard on myself and kept pushing myself, and it kept getting worse. It didn't work out for me at all. I eventually found this wonderful doctor at Vanderbilt Medical Center, and he did something called a transesophageal echo. It's unlike the typical echo or ultrasound that they do from the outside of the heart. When you do an echo from the outside of the heart, it has to bounce off the breast tissue, any air that's in your lungs, so the picture that you get may not be as clear as a transesophageal. Transesophageal means down your esophagus. So they relax you with a medication so you're not awake. And then they put this scope down your esophagus and it lays right against the heart. The difference is, like with an echo, I can look out the window and tell you there's 5 cars across the street and there's a blue one, a green one, a yellow one. And with a transesophageal echo, I not only can see the cars across the street, I can tell you how many doors are on the car, what make the car is. I can, you just get so much more detail. So I remember waking up from the anesthesia and looking at my husband's face and knowing what I was about to hear wasn't good. And I looked at the doctor and I said, "Did you find anything?" And he said, "Yes, Mrs. Statunas, we did. And unfortunately, it's not anxiety or depression medication that you need." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "The ring that was placed into your heart, the cortex ring that was placed into your heart has torn out of place. It's now an obstruction. You need
Oh,
emergency open heart surgery and you need it rather soon." So again, I just couldn't believe it. And as soon as we got in the car, my husband called his boss, who I absolutely love to this day. Every time I see him, I get choked up because I remember everything that he did for us. He immediately let us out of our 3-year contract. By the time we pulled in the driveway, the real estate lady was there putting the sign in the driveway, putting the sign in the house for the for sale sign up. The movers came the next day, and for 3 days straight, we packed up the house. On the 3rd day, they came and got our cars. The cars were taken away. We got into a limo and went to the airport, and we headed to Syracuse. We came right back to Syracuse because I was so sick. We needed the support of our family. The minute we hit the ground, my husband went to put our stuff in storage. We lived with his parents because we had nowhere to live. Everything happened so quickly. And at the time, my best friend's husband picked me up at the airport and took me right to the Red Cross to donate my own blood for the surgery. And he never left my side the whole time. And again, here I was just 1 year later, now having my second open heart surgery. So on October the 1st, 2002, I had my second heart surgery. This was a mitral valve replacement. They took out the repair and replaced it with a porcine valve, porcine meaning pig. And at the time, again, I was an uneducated heart patient. When I went for the surgery consult, the doctor handed me 2 pamphlets. One was for a mechanical heart valve and one was for a pig valve. And he handed it to me and said, "You make the choice."
oh,
I was like, "Oh, okay." So I read both pamphlets, and being uneducated, I chose the pig valve. I was under the impression that pig valves would last at least 20 years. I knew that it would mean another heart surgery in my life, but I thought that was 20 years down the road. And I figured with technology, I'd be good. And I chose the pig valve based on the fact that I would only have to take a baby aspirin and not Coumadin, the blood thinner. And I had that second surgery, and I was better than I
how
was.
long did you have to make that decision between the?
Not long. Not long.
Wow.
No.
It's hard.
And
That's
keep
not a lot of time to have to be able to do your homework and get educated.
And there wasn't, the internet was just starting, it was just getting big back then. You couldn't really Google all the stuff today. YouTube wasn't as big back then as it is today. There was some information out there. I'm not going to say there wasn't, there was, but it was very limited. And so I had that second heart surgery, and I was better than I was with the first heart surgery, but I wasn't great. And I would spend the next decade of my life trying to convince anybody to believe me. Within 4 or 5 months, all of my symptoms came back with a vengeance. The blue fingers, the blue lips, the shortness of breath. I'm 5'2", and I typically weigh like 115. I've pretty much weighed that my whole life. And shortly after that surgery, I always lose a ton of weight after surgery, and that's common after a big surgery like that. But I usually stabilize after about a year, and I'm usually fine. But with this surgery, I did lose the weight right after, but then I started gaining weight pretty rapidly. And the funny thing was, I wasn't eating more, and it didn't make any sense to me. In fact, I was eating less because I was nauseous all the time, and I would eat very limited things. So I couldn't understand why I kept getting so big. Again, kept seeing doctor after doctor, and every doctor handed me a script for anxiety and depression medication and told me to see a psychiatrist. Well, Mary, I did go see a psychiatrist and I was evaluated. I have no history of mental illness, neither does anybody in my family. So I went and saw the psychiatrist and spent 2 hours being evaluated. And he sat back and he said to me, I don't see it. He's like, I don't see clinical depression in you. I don't see clinical anxiety in you. He goes, I think you have situational anxiety from not being heard.
For sure.
But he said, I don't see that. And I said, thank you. Can you put it in writing? And he did. And I carried that little piece of paper around in my purse with me, like Linus carrying his blanket. I thought, they're going to listen to me now. I got this piece of paper. I've been evaluated. Didn't make a big difference at all. Everywhere I went, I was seen with the same pair of eyes. In fact, I remember I spent a lot of time being brought by ambulance to the hospital. And I'll never forget when I was brought in for the last time before my third heart surgery, and I could overhear them muttering behind the desk at the nurse's station saying, she's back.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was hurtful. And they were like, oh, she's here again. And you could tell they were just disgusted with me. They were just disgusted with me. And it was hurtful as a patient, as a human being to hear that. Like in my head, I'm thinking, they're never going to help me. I'm a thorn in their side. I got to the point where I started to feel like there was nothing I could do. No matter what I said or how sick I was, they had a preconceived notion of who I was, and they were going with that. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. Somewhere along the way, someone wrote in my chart that I was histrionic and I was mentally ill. And it didn't matter that I had this letter. They didn't even want to see the letter. So I remember being just very frustrated and going to my primary care, because you have to check up with every time you go to the ER or you're admitted, you have to follow up with your primary care doctor. And I remember saying to him, help me sidestep this. No one believes me. And honestly, I'm not so sure that my primary care at that time believed me either. But he said, give me the letter, I'll copy it, and we'll make an addendum to your chart. And that will be the first thing that's seen when you go to the ER. But guess what? Every time I went to the ER, it didn't matter. So I had to become my own advocate. I had to start researching. And I did. I hit the ground running. And because I was hell-bent on, if no one was going to find out what was wrong with me, then I was going to find out what was wrong with me. And keep in mind, I have no education medically. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a PA. I just was driven because I was a sick person that needed help, and I needed someone to hear me. And that's the biggest reason why I became a health and wellness advocate and speaker. It's the biggest reason why I accepted the invitation to be on the Dr. Oz show, why I work closely with my genetic specialist, because unfortunately, this is how it is. When I was recovering from my last heart surgery, I did a lot of research. And one of the things I came across in my researches was that the top 3 reasons why people die. Do you know what they are?
No.
Number 1 is heart disease, more than all cancers combined. Number 2 is cancer. Number 3 is medical error. We have to be better, stronger, braver, more empowered and educated patients to speak up for ourselves. I also learned through my experience that there's a huge gender bias. Had I gone into the hospital with my same symptoms as a man, I most likely would have been treated very differently. Another thing I ran across, which I found very interesting, is that the medications that we take, that they do clinical studies on, women aren't often included in those studies. And women process and metabolize medication very differently than men. So now the NIH, the National Institute of Health, is now they're trying to make a change with that, a positive change for the better. And they're including more women in their studies. And I'm so grateful for that. But all of those things are important details. And so I started to pay attention to these little bits of information that I was getting. And I started to study different things because I've long suspected, and I have told my doctors for about 15 years prior to my third heart surgery, that I thought I had a genetic disorder. They said, what do you think you have? And I said, I think I have a genetic connective tissue disease called Ehlers-Danlos. It's EHLERS is the first word, and the second word is DANLOS. And they said, no, you don't. You don't have that. I said, I'm pretty sure I do. And not only am I pretty sure that I have it, I think it would explain all of my cardiac issues that we can make no sense of. And my doctor said, no, there's no connection there. I said, I think you're misinformed. And he kind of was a little bit taken back, and I could tell by his mannerisms that he was not pleased. Like he instantly turned his computer toward himself and he started typing like very aggressively, and he
Oh boy.
looked on his face. And then he looked at the computer and he looked over at me and he said, Mrs. Satunis, it would seem that I owe you an apology. There is a strong connection to this. May I have your, because I had a folder full of my studies, and I highlighted everything and I circled and I made notes all over. And he said, may I take that from you? He said, I'll have some homework to do over the weekend. And this was on a Friday. He read through all my notes. He went through my chart, and he did his own studies because he can go to a medical website that's strictly for physicians. He called me on Sunday afternoon, very apologetic, and said, I think you're onto something here. And it's out of my realm of knowledge. You need to see a genetic specialist. So I called everywhere. I called Hershey, I called New York, I called, you name it. And the list was long. The list was anywhere between 9 and 18 months. I ended up finding a geneticist in Syracuse, New York, where we grew up. And his waiting list was the shortest. It was 9 months.
Wow.
And I got on the list. And while I was waiting, I nearly died. And so fast forward to the fall of 2011, keep in mind that up until this point, I progressively got worse. I could no longer work. I couldn't do a flight of stairs. When I did a flight of stairs, I would get to the top of the stairs and it would take me 5 minutes to recover. And at this point, Mary, I'm still 5'2", but now I weigh 180 pounds. 180 pounds. And I'm having erratic heart rate. I'm dizzy all the time. I'm struggling to breathe. Over a 4-week period, I go to the ER. And the first 3 times they go through the whole chest x-ray. They check your troponin levels, which is something that's an indicator of a heart attack. And they came back and said, you're not having a heart attack. And your x-rays look fine. And again, would tell my husband, stop bringing her here. She's clearly histrionic. You really need to consider perhaps, committing her or sending her someplace where she can be evaluated for a little while. I can remember sitting in my bed they took him outside of the door, but the door was open. It was these 2 glass doors that were open. I could hear the whole conversation. And I just sat in the hospital bed and wept. I just sobbed. And it was the worst feeling to feel that no one believed you, that they actually thought I was making this up. And I even had doctors ask me, what are you looking for? What are you seeking here? Like, what do you mean? What am I seeking? What do you mean? What am I seeking? I think they thought I was a pill seeker based on the list of medications that had been given to me. But let me be clear, I didn't take half of them. Like the stuff that was addictive, I never took, because I have a family that has a lot of substance abuse issues. So for me, there was a great fear in that. And secondly, because anytime I'd ever been given any pain medication, I have broken both of my ankles and was given pain medication. It didn't go well for me. I don't handle pain medication like anybody else. I just don't. My body doesn't like it. So for me, it's not I don't understand people taking certain drugs and getting addicted to them, because
Right.
they
You
make me
feel so sick. Yeah.
so deathly sick.
Yeah, me too.
And so I've always struggled with that. And so I remember riding home in the car after that 3rd visit and crying the whole way home, just crying the whole way home, and just pleading with God for my life and saying, God, something's wrong with me, and I feel like I'm dying, and I'm not ready to die. And please, Lord, help me. Please send someone to help me. And I prayed and I prayed. And that night I went to sleep in my room. John slept downstairs because I hadn't slept in days. I went in my room and I had to put all these pillows all around me to kind of support me, because whenever I leaned back or I laid down, it was exactly like they tell you, like there's an elephant sitting on your chest. Like you can't inhale to get the air in. And my heart was just my heartbeat was so erratic. And I didn't sleep the whole night. I dozed off here or there. And I remember just finally the sun came up, and I was so glad, because it seemed like it was the longest night of my life. And I thought, okay, I got to get up and go brush these teeth. I got to just go brush my teeth and make the best of this day, whatever it has for me. I just got to, I got to move forward. And I got up and went to walk into my bathroom to brush my teeth and collapsed on the floor. And I suddenly had excruciating abdominal pain, which was a new symptom for me. I had never had that before. And I was so weak. I went to push myself up and couldn't. My arms started to shake, really, like my arms couldn't even hold my weight. I was that weak, and I was shaking uncontrollably. And I didn't know what the shaking was about, because that also was a new symptom for me. And I believe at that moment, what I was having was adrenaline surges, because it felt like electricity going down both of my arms and into my legs. And my husband came in the room and saw me laying on the floor and went to prop me up, and I couldn't hold myself up. I just kept flopping over. And he's like, I'm calling an ambulance. I want you to go back to the hospital. And I said, no, I'm not going. And he's like, you have to go. And I said, why? Like, I could barely speak at this point. I go, they don't believe me. They're not going to help me. I'm going to die before they figure this out. And I remember saying to my mother-in-law the night before. My mother-in-law is a very strong Catholic Italian woman, and she's retired now, but she used to be a paralegal. And she's like one of my best friends. She's been like a mom to me, and I just love her so much. And she has taken such amazing care of me during all of this. Taken personal time off from work, just did everything for us. Just been so wonderful. And I said to her, when I die, because I was convinced that I would, when I die, I said, I want you to have an autopsy done on my body. And when it comes back that I shouldn't have died, I want you to sue everybody in sight, everybody that treated me. And let me be clear, it wasn't about the money. It was about, I had to make this better for the next person that came along. And doing nothing did not feel right to me. We had to do something to make a record of this so that it would be better for everybody that came after me. And that's always been my goal. So she promised, because I knew my husband wouldn't do that. My husband would say, she's been through enough. Let her rest in peace. And that would be the end of it. And I couldn't. So I went back to the hospital. They went through the same old tests that they always do, chest x-ray, blood work for troponin levels. I had 10 people come in and listen to my heart. They hooked me up to the machines and the monitor. And then after about 2.5 hours, this young doctor doing his fellowship in cardiology comes in, and I happen to notice in his left hand discharge papers and a script for Ativan.
Oh boy, oh boy.
And I got really angry. And I said to my mother-in-law, you might want to leave right now, because I'm pretty sure I'm about to embarrass you. And I'm sure as heck probably not going to be a very good example of a fine Christian woman right about now. And I remember turning my head to him and saying, I'm not leaving here. Do you hear me? I'm not leaving here. I said, something is wrong with me and you're all missing it. And I'm pretty sure I'm dying. And then I started to tell him the story about what happened to me in Tennessee, and how nobody believed me there either, until this one doctor stepped up for me and took this transesophageal echo and discovered I needed emergency open heart surgery. And I remember I put my hands together like I was begging, and I said to him, I'm not ready to die. Thank you for helping me today, but please send someone else in to take another look, because I'm not leaving here today. And I didn't know until that very minute that that's an option. Like, you can refuse to leave the ER. And I didn't know it until I was doing it. And I tell everybody in my speeches, if you don't feel good and sound about your discharge, your gut's speaking to you, go with your gut, because it saved my life. My gut was telling me, don't leave here. And so he left, and he went and got his senior cardiologist, who did a simple blood test. that was never given to me in my prior 3 visits. It's called a B like boy, N like Nancy, P like Paul test, BNP test. And what it does is it looks at your blood levels. And I was told a BNP test in a normal healthy person would be less than 100. If you had had some salty French fries or potato chips, it might be 80 or 100. Mine that day in the ER was 904 and climbing.
Wow.
I was an end stage class 4 heart failure, and I did not have long to live. No one told me that diagnosis. They immediately admitted me to a room. I have never been admitted to a room so fast in my life. I've waited hours for a room to open. I was in that room in less than 10 minutes. And I went from having nobody in my room to all these people running around in the room. And I was greeted at the door by this lovely nurse by the name of Dana. And she said to me, "Hi, Mrs. Satunis. What brings you here today?" As she's typing into the computer and reading the computer, I'm on the other side of the computer talking to her. I said, "I don't know. I guess they don't know what's wrong with me and you're going to observe me for the weekend. Isn't that the routine?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Who told you that?" I said, "Well, no one told me anything. Why?" And she said, "Mrs. Satunis, you were very sick." She goes, "In fact, you're so sick, I'm putting the railings up on both sides of your bed and I don't want you getting out of this bed." And she said, "And I'm bringing in a commode because I don't even want you walking to the bathroom. And if you need to use the bathroom, I want you to call me because you can't be doing this yourself." Prior to bringing me to that room, though, that young intern came back, that young resident who was doing his fellowship came back, did not make eye contact with me, and handed me a paper cup and a pill and said, "Mrs. Satunis, I need you to take this pill right now." I said, "For what is it?" He said, "It's Lasix. Lasix is a drug for fluid." I said, "Why are you giving me that?" And he said, "It's in case there's any fluid in your heart or around in your lungs or around your heart that I can't see in an x-ray." I go, "Why?" I go, "I just was here 4 times. 4 times you took chest x-rays on me over the past month. You were just going to send me home. Why are you giving me that?" And he shoved it to me wide-eyed and said, "Mrs. Satunis, please take this pill right now." And I took it. And within 20 minutes, I was urinating like I had never urinated in my life. I didn't even know where all these fluids were coming from.
Wow.
And I started to breathe a little bit better. It wasn't until Dana met me at the door that no one told me what was going on. It wasn't until Dana told me and put the railings up on the side of my bed and said, "You're really sick and I don't want you getting out of this bed." And she told me about the BNP test. She said, "We did a test in the ER today. It's a BNP test." She told me what the big long name was for BNP. And she said, what it is in a normal healthy person would be less than 100. She goes, "Yours was 904. She goes, I just paged the 2 chief cardiothoracic surgeons. They will be here momentarily. You're in end stage class 4 CHF." And everything was a blur to me, but I was very clear. I did know, I was educated enough to know that CHF was congestive heart failure. And I looked at her and I said, "Oh my Lord, I'm in heart failure? I'm in congestive heart failure?" She said, "You are." And I just began to sob. I remember looking out my window and thinking of all the things I wanted to do, all the places I wanted to go. My daughter, we didn't think my daughter could have kids. And we had just found out that she was pregnant. And we shortly right before this, not long before this, she found out it was a girl. And I wanted so much to meet that little girl. And I just was thinking about all of that. And my head was spinning. And I remember just crying and crying. I was uncontrollably crying. And as I was sitting there crying, my mother-in-law was trying to comfort me. And she's like, "Honey, you have to calm down. This isn't good for your heart. You got to try to stay calm." And I remember seeing this white, like something white flashing out of the corner of my eye as I was blowing my nose. And I turned my head and it was my heart surgeon standing in his white jacket. And he introduced himself. He said, "Hi, Mrs. Satunis. My name is Dr. Raymond Singer. I'm the chief cardiothoracic surgeon here at Lehigh Valley. And this is my partner, Gary Sadlowski." And he said, "You're a really sick woman." And I said, yeah, I know." And he said, "I gotta ask you, why did you wait so long to get help? Surely you had signs." And then I started screaming at this poor guy. I said, "Let me tell you something. Let me just tell you a story." And I just was yelling. I completely lost it and started yelling, screaming at him. And I'm sure at that moment, he probably thought, "Crazy lady." But I'm sure he understood. And so little by little, Dr. Singer worked his way from my right foot all the way over to the left side of my bed. And he was standing there, and he listened to my whole story for every minute that he was there. And he spent a good over hour and a half with me and my mother-in-law. My husband and my father-in-law got stuck in my husband and my father-in-law got stuck in traffic. My mother-in-law rode in the ambulance with me. And he said, is there anything else? Have you told me everything? And I said, there's one more thing. I said, I think I have a genetic connective tissue disease. And he went, what do you do for a living? I said, not what you'd guess. And he said, why do you think that? And I told him about my years of studying it and how I was on a waiting list to see my genetic specialist, and I didn't make it. Here I was. And he said, well, that's good. That's really good information to have going into a third open heart surgery with a third sternotomy, meaning cutting my chest open. He said, not having that information could be catastrophic. So we're going to proceed as though you have this, which was a huge comfort to me. And then he said, he was holding my hand, and he said, first, let me say to you how sorry I am for everything that's happened to you that's led you to this moment. For everyone that came before me, let me apologize. And there was something so profoundly healing in that, Mary, that because no one ever said they were sorry.
You felt seen, you felt heard.
100%. And he was holding my hand, and he looked me in the eyes, and he said, what I'm about to ask you is going to be the hardest thing that you've done in these 10 years. And I went, what? He said, I'm asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust me and my team. We'll take good care of you here. You have my word. And I was like, well, you're not here to put me on the helicopter to the Cleveland Clinic? Because that's why I thought he was there. I was always told, because of my condition and the high risk and the prior surgeries and the scar tissue, that it was just too complex of a case to be handled where I live. I would have to go to someplace like the Cleveland Clinic. And Dr. Singer said, no, Mrs. Atunis, he said, I couldn't put you on that helicopter in good faith, knowing that you might not survive the flight. He's like, we're your best hope. And he said, the only issue I have right now is that tomorrow is my holy day. He's Jewish, and it was Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah has become an important day in my life, because that was the day my life was saved. And so he said, but you don't worry about that. He goes, you focus on getting better, and you let me handle the rest. And he went out and did whatever he needed to do and juggled all those batons in the air. And about 30 minutes later, his PA came in and said, Singer's got a room, an OR booked, and we're going to do this. Are you up for this? And I said, yes. And now keep in mind, I didn't know anything about Dr. Singer. I knew nothing. I had lived here for years. I didn't know anything. I thought I was going to have to go to the Cleveland Clinic. So I immediately started calling every doctor friend that I knew. My husband's boss is on the board of directors at the hospital. I called my primary care physician, who I trusted, all of my friends that were in the medical field. I said, get your computers out and start Googling, get all the information you can on this guy, because I know nothing about him. And one by one, every phone would ring. It was my mother-in-law's phone, my husband's phone, everybody's phone would ring. And they said, God walked in the room with you today. You could not have had a better person step in as your advocate today and your surgeon. And what I found out was he was like in the top 10 in our area. He's very educated when it comes to a genetic connective tissue disease, to the Ehlers-Danlos, that we later found out that I have. And just an all around, he was the perfect person. And I believe God sent him to me. I couldn't have asked for a better surgeon. And more importantly, I feel like I got like a brother out of the deal. I feel like Dr. Singer's the brother that I never had. He's become a mentor and a friend. My husband and I, my family, my grandchildren know his name. His name is a spoken name in our house all the time. In fact, when Peyton was like, I want to say 4 years old, she did a video thanking him for saving my life. They know who he is. They know his picture. They know what he looks like. He's a hero to us. We don't idolize too many people, or we're not big fans of too many people. But that guy, he's a very humble man. I see God's love in that man in every single thing he does. And I'm so grateful that God sent him to me. So
after I was stable, I went in the next day and I had an 8.5 hour surgery to save my life. And what was discovered in that OR that day is astounding to me. I remember waking up in intensive care that night with the breathing tubes in, and I couldn't speak. So my husband came over and kissed me on the forehead and said, Dr. Singer hit it out of the ballpark for us today. Michelle, you were so much sicker than we knew. Do you understand? And I nodded. He said, he removed your mitral valve, pig valve, from the mitral valve position and replaced it with a mechanical heart valve. Do you hear yourself ticking? And I nodded no, because all I could hear were the machines in my room. And there's a lot of machines in your room. And he said, while he was in there, he discovered there was another issue with your tricuspid valve. So he had to repair that. That was a surprise to us. We did not know anything about that. And keep in mind, like, nobody was taking me seriously. So it was never explored. So he said he also did a third procedure called a maze procedure, because the months that led up to this third heart surgery, I had developed something called atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is an irregular heartbeat that can put you at a high risk for blood clots and stroke. Right. So he did this maze procedure to help that dangerous arrhythmia that I was having. And then my husband said, and here's the kicker, so listen closely. He said, you were never crazy, Michelle. Dr. Singer just confirmed to us that you had something called patient prosthetic mismatch. There was a mismatch of the valve that was given to you for your second heart surgery, and it was way too small for you. So all those years that I was being treated as a mental patient, I really had a legitimate disorder. And it was the fact that I was given the wrong heart valve in my second heart surgery. I have to believe that that diagnosis is in fact true, because within 5 days of my new heart surgery, I dropped 42 pounds doing nothing. My heart was finally beating properly, and it was just ridding itself of all of this fluid. I was sweating like crazy. And I called it.
What the weight was. It was all fluid, right? I just wanted to.
If you had seen a picture of me, Mary, of what I looked like before, I still can't believe it. And when I showed it to other people, I actually showed it to my surgeon and I showed it to other doctor friends. They're like, how did anybody miss that? Like, you can see my fingers were so swollen. I couldn't wear my wedding rings for 10 years. I couldn't wear them because I couldn't get them past the first knuckle. I had like little sausage fingers. I remember that day going into the ER, you could see my carotid arteries bouncing off of my neck, which is another huge earmarking, I'm sure. I now weigh 109 pounds. I'm thinner now than I was in high school. I can run up and down the stairs. I can ride my bike. I can dance. I can breathe. My lips are not blue. My fingers are not blue. I'm not dizzy all the time and fainting. I'm not exhausted. I always tell in my speeches that I felt like I lived my life in black and white for a decade. And then Dr. Singer saved my life and fixed my heart, and everything went into Technicolor. Like, everything is this beautiful Technicolor. And that's the biggest way I can describe it. I wasn't living, Mary, I was existing. And before that heart surgery, I just was really hopeless. And you want to talk about grief. Like, grief comes in many forms, like you said at the beginning of this podcast. Grief isn't just when we lose someone that we love. It can be, you can grieve the life that you thought you would have. You can grieve, many things. And for me, I was grieving what my life I thought would be. I was grieving all the years lost, the decade of my life that I would never have back. I was going through all these emotions, but grief was definitely in there. And
grieving the fact that you may never be well again. Grieving the things that we take for granted, like, being able to, get out of bed easily, or, walk down or walk up a hill, walk up a driveway, potentially, things like that. Grieving the loss of, what is the loss of your future as you perceived it might be.
Yeah. And I always say that I'm so blessed that my husband has been my biggest cheerleader. And I remember right before they wheeled me into the operating room, I said to him, there's something I need to say to you. And he'd given me a notebook. I had requested a notebook the day I was admitted, and I wrote all of my wishes upon my death. I remember calling the funeral home and telling them, this is what I want. This, my family's going to call you when I pass, and this is what we're going to do. And this is what my wishes are. I don't want to put them through it. I put it in a notebook. They'll have the notebook, but this is what I want to do. And I remember having this whole conversation. I'm not even sure if I remember telling my husband that I did that, but I did do that. And I remember calling everybody and saying my goodbyes to everybody and telling everybody to, pray for my family and to be there for my family. And I remember saying to my husband, because my husband's 4 years younger than me, and I remember saying to him, you have my blessings to marry again, and I want you to, because you are such a wonderful, loving soul. And I want this for you. And I didn't want him, he's like, stop. I don't want you talking like that. He's like, you're going to get fixed and you're going to be fine. And I didn't think I would be, because I was so very, very sick with this heart surgery. In my other 2 heart surgeries, I was much stronger. And heart surgery is a big deal. It's a big deal. And I just couldn't conceive that I could be this sick and survive it. I didn't know how I would ever survive it, because I was that sick. I thought there's no way I'm going to pull through this. I just didn't think I would. And the symptoms that I told you about, I had excruciating abdominal pain. And I remember the moment that my husband called the ambulance. And I was saying, I had this terrible pain. It feels like I rolled over on something sharp. And I remember lifting up, he was on the phone with the ambulance. And I remember lifting up my shirt, and my whole abdomen was purple like a plum. And it was very distended. I later found out it was because I was in heart failure and the blood was pooling in my abdomen, which is not a good sign. And I remember that moment when I lifted it up, and I felt like the whole world went into slow motion. I could hear my heart beating in my ear. It was like a swooshing sound, like swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. And I remember slowly looking up and making eye contact with my husband. And it was just this unspoken understanding between us. No words were said, but my eyes teared up and his eyes teared up, and he told the ambulance they needed to hurry. And he was trying to be so strong for me. And I remember having this conversation with God in that very moment, like, don't you do it. Don't you dare do it. Don't you do it here in this house. Don't you do it in front of my husband. Whatever you do, Lord, if this is the day, it's not going to be here. Please, Lord, I'm begging you, don't let it be in this house where they have to live. And if don't let it be in the ambulance. If you're taking me, let it be out of their sight. Don't let them see it. And I was making these plans. I was, having this whole conversation as though God was in that room with me right in that moment. And I remember in the ambulance when they were trying to get my blood pressure and it wouldn't register. And when they finally did, my blood pressure was like 68/38. And if you know anything about your blood pressure, that's bad. And I remember at one point, my heart rate was only 28 beats a minute. And it was so erratic. And I knew that wasn't good. And I remember just saying out loud, like, God, I'm not done. I'm not done. You have to give me more time. And I promise you, I will make you proud. I will devote the rest of my life to helping others. And every day, Mary, God has made that possible for me. I have people who reach out to me either through Facebook or my website, people from all over the country. I recently had a woman, this lovely woman, reach out to me from Arizona, and her story paralleled my story. She had a failed surgery the November before, 2019. And all of 2020, she struggled and no one was believing her. And she reached out to me through Facebook, and we talked on the phone and we became very dear friends. I grew to love this woman dearly. And she needed a 3rd open heart surgery. And she had it this month. And I've been an advocate now. I'm celebrating in October this year. It'll be 10 years since my last heart surgery, since my 3rd heart surgery. And I've been advocating since then. I started advocating about the following year by volunteering at the hospital and then starting my website and working with the American Heart Association and working with some other local charities. So I've been advocating for people for that long, for about 10 years. And this is the first time for me in that 10 years that someone I was advocating for didn't survive. And this lovely person, her name was Sherry. passed away this month. And I took it really bad. I took it really bad. I mean, we're getting choked up now. Because she wanted to live too. And she had so many plans. And the thing that comforts me the most is that she was a strong woman of faith. And her faith carried her, just like with me. My faith has carried me. I don't know where I would be without my faith. And I remember sitting down for one moment when she had passed away 2 weeks ago and saying to my husband, you know, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like, maybe it's just not for me and whatever. And he said, nope, 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 stop. He said, the best way you can honor Sherry is to continue to advocate for everybody else. This was her journey. Like this, you know, you and I talked about this before on the phone, that we have these soul agreements, you know, like, and maybe this was her soul agreement. And I do believe, and I will share her story. I'm going to get permission from her family to include that in my next speech. I want to be able to have her story be a teaching moment for other people, and that something good will come of it, and that things will be learned from it. That's what I want for my own story. My goal has always been to empower and to educate and inspire everybody, not just about heart disease, about your health. Like, heart disease is a preventable disease. I mean, we get genetic stuff, but if we eat better, if we take better care of ourselves, if we go out and spend 20 minutes in nature every day, if we exercise, don't eat, you know, food that's loaded with chemicals, and, you know, eat a healthier diet and pay better attention and become our own advocates with our doctors. Like, we're both team players. Be a team player with your doctor, because the goal is the same. We both want to hit it out of the ballpark. We both want to be helped. You know, your doctor wants it for you as much as you want it for yourself.
Right.
And we have to become active in that. We have to become empowered, braver patients. Medicine has become a really big business. We have to be more informed and empowered to speak up when it's necessary. If there's no silly questions. If you have questions, ask. Reach out to someone and ask.
And we have to realize that doctors are human beings. They're just doctors, and they don't necessarily have all the answers or all the information that they need. And sometimes, if we are our own advocates, we might, as you did, bring something forth, and they may resist it, because I think that there's a possibility, well, that, you know, there are some doctors who, you know, who think that they know everything there is to know on certain topics, but they don't necessarily. And so to be your own advocate and to be brave enough and courageous enough to bring that information forward, even when they don't listen, to continue to advocate for yourself, you know, thank God you did. You know, and thank God that you know, that you had a few doctors who were willing to listen.
Oh yeah, that was key. Like, when my primary care said, this is out of my realm, you need to see a genetic specialist, I so appreciated that he stepped up and said, hey, this is out of what I know. Let's get you to someone who can help you.
He could have said, like many other doctors said, you're fine. Yeah, here's another script, you're fine. Yes, but he didn't. He was willing to entertain the possibility that he didn't have all the answers.
And to listen. And you know, the funny thing was, he just retired a year ago, right before COVID, he retired. And on our last day together, I was very emotional saying goodbye to him. I love him so. And he said, listen, before you leave, I want to say something to you. He said, most doctors aren't going to like to see you when you're coming. And he said, I go, what do you mean? And he said, they're not going to like how informed you are, and that you ask a lot of questions and you look up stuff. And I said, look, I'm not trying to be the doctor. I'm just trying to understand so I can better serve myself.
And give them the information that might trigger something that they might be able to then use. You know, that's the way I feel about it when I go. I'm trying to be as informed as I can be, so that they know that I know what they're talking about, so that I might offer just the tiniest piece that might change everything.
Right.
Which is what you do.
2 months after my third open heart surgery, I met with my genetic specialist in Syracuse, New York, spent 2 hours with him. He went through all of my paperwork. He went through all of my chart, all of my scans, did a physical examination of my body, and then turned to me and said, Mrs. Satunas, you're quite remarkable. You have exactly what you said you have. He said, you have Ehlers-Danlos type 3. I have the hypermobile type. I have like, my skin is very stretchy and
Oh,
velvety.
wow.
Yeah, it's very stretchy and velvety. Like if you were to touch it, it's very velvety. I have very flat feet and pronated ankles. They turn inward. My knees look like they're going backwards. I remember in gym class in high school, people coming up behind me. We were doing archery one day in gym class, and people kept coming up to me and saying, how do you make your knees do that? And I kept saying, do what? I didn't know they were doing anything.
Hmm.
I was like, what do you mean? What are my knees doing?
Sounds like Marcellus.
Yeah. How do you make your knees do that? I broke both of my ankles in my life, just simply rolling them. Like went to stand on my tiptoe. I remember once I was jogging in high school, and the road had just gotten paved, and I happened to hit it the wrong way. And it was only paved up like 2 inches, and I rolled it and broke it. And, I'd broken my arm before. We have more fragile bones too with EDS. And I had very heavy droopy eyelids. And I didn't know that that was also an ear marking for it. And it ended up affecting like my outer vision, my peripheral vision. And I ended up going and seeing Dr. Bersani when I was like 45 and having plastic surgery to correct it, but never knowing that that was also an ear marking. Our skin tends to tear easily and bruise easily. It's almost like fragile, like cigar paper. I've had like 80-year-old lady hands since I've been 7 years old. And I have another earmarking of Ehlers-Danlos is like I have a lot of stomach issues, gastro issues. I have to be very careful about what I eat. I have to eat very small meals throughout the day. Instead of like a big meal. It's like having a big meal is a real strain on my heart. It's too much for it. I have to do little tiny meals. The cardiac issues, the mitral valve prolapse is a huge earmarking for it. A lot of times people will be diagnosed with something called fibromyalgia in their 20s, as I was, because they have a lot of this unexplainable pain. And the reason we have that unexplainable pain is because every muscle and tendon is firing to try to support our skeletal structure because our tissues are weaker. We are born with a mutated gene whereby we have less collagen. Collagen, as you know, is the glue that holds everything together. And as you age, you lose collagen. So this disease kind of rears its ugly head in the 4th and 5th decade of life. So people need to be educated about this. Unfortunately, it's not prevalently taught in medical school. I think they get something like 18 hours on it unless you go to school for dermatology. But you're not going to go see your dermatologist for palpitations and dizziness and erratic heart rate or whatever. So I'm working very closely with my dermatology office. I've signed off on all of my records to everybody so that they can use my case as a way of teaching other medical students. I do speeches to medical students and staff. I have one coming up where I do the PA group, the physician's assistants, every year at this time of the year at DeSales University. I tell my story to the class so that they are educated about it. I had a really kind of cool experience. Before COVID, I was in the hospital. I had eaten something cold and it triggered atrial fibrillation, and I ended up in the hospital and I had to be cardioverted. Cardioverted is where they put you in it under anesthesia and then they jolt you with the paddles to put you back into rhythm. And for me, unfortunately, because I was given the wrong heart valve, I have a severely enlarged left atrium, and it rests right against my esophagus. So when I ate the frozen yogurt, it changed the temperature of my esophagus, and that cold esophagus resting against my heart triggered the arrhythmia. Wow. So I had to be cardioverted. But while I was there, a young ER doc came in and he said, "You probably don't remember me." And I said, I'm sorry, I don't. I was kind of looking at him like, I don't know, I don't. And he said, "I'll never forget you." He said, "You spoke to our residency class when we first started out." And he said, "And every day I think of your story, and every day your story has helped me." Wow. And my husband goes, see, he goes, "That's why you do this. This is why you do this." And he started giving me.
Does it help? Did it help him to stay open or to listen, more intently, or to just?
That's exactly what he said. He said, and I remember this too. I remember one of the first times, like I get choked up telling my story because it happened to me. I sometimes will get teared up, but I never gave it a thought that someone I'm telling this story to is going to get teared up. And I remember one of the first times I spoke, there was a table of these 3 guys in front of me. And when I first started telling the story, they were eyeball rolling me, like they didn't believe it really happened. And I remember them going to their phone and starting to text, like I felt like I lost them as I was speaking. And then somehow I got them back in because they all put their phones down and they were listening so intently. And by the end of the speech, in my conversation with them, we did a question and answer thing. And one of them started to get really choked up and started crying. He said, all of a sudden, he goes, I gotta be honest with you, in the beginning of this, I eyeball rolled you and thought, there's no way that this could possibly happen. There's just no way this could possibly happen. And I said, it did happen. And not only did it happen, it didn't happen once. It happened multiple times over a decade. It happened to me in the state of Pennsylvania. It happened to me in the state of Tennessee. It happened to me in the state of New York. It happened throughout a course of 10 years in 3 different states that I lived in multiple places, in multiple hospitals, with multiple doctors. I said, it happens. And he said, and I started to think of my mom. I started to think of my sister.
Wow.
I started to think of my grandmother who we lost to heart failure. He said, it's made me a different, he said something like he felt like it made him a better listener. It made him a better doctor. And that's all I needed to hear. That's my hope. That's my hope when I share the story.
Wow. So during the time, all right, so all those years that you were struggling and, trying to get to the bottom of it, I mean, what would you say to somebody who's, suffering like that, in pain and doesn't have the answers, or, is it your faith, or what was it that helped you to continue to persevere during that time? What kind of hope might you offer anybody listening?
Well, I'm going to tell you for sure. First and foremost, make sure that you surround yourself. Your circle of people are so important, Mary, and I think you probably know this too. Throughout my journey with my health stuff, I've had so many friends come and go. You're not the fun friend when you're sick. You're not the fun friend when you're having heart surgery. I mean, people who claim to be your friend, you'd be really surprised though, in a time of crisis, who's still standing there with you.
For sure.
And it's a hard realization when you are suddenly sitting there. It's a hard pill to swallow. And it's a painful pill to swallow. But
people you think are going to be there on your journey aren't, because they're unable to come to to come face to face with, that kind of pain,
did you find that true too in your loss?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, very much so. I actually had people, straight up say, I can't be here. I can't be there for you. Close people to me. I can't be there.
Yeah, that hurts. That hurts me to hear that, because for me, I feel like we are our best selves when we help to encourage others. I think, and I've said this before, and I will say it again, the road in life is so bumpy. There are so many bumps in the road. There's divorces, there's losing jobs, there's moving, there's health stuff, there's loss, there's, you lose family members. There's so many things. I feel like when we are loving one another, we need to love each other through the bumps in life. We can help to smooth out the bumps when we are there to help hold the hand of someone and just encourage them. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything. Sometimes it's just being there, just letting them know that you're there, even if you're just sitting there in silence.
Sometimes that's even the best way, and because a lot of times we don't, there isn't really anything that you can say that's going to necessarily take my pain away at any given moment. But if you're willing just to sit with me and in that silence, just to witness that silence, just to sit in silence is huge.
The things that I found the most comforting were the friends that came and showed up at the hospital, like just show up, like they didn't know what to say, or they didn't know. And like, especially after that third surgery, when I came so close to death. And I do want to share with you sometime, I don't know if you want to do it today or another time, my near-death experience, about where I really truly believe I went somewhere else.
I do. I think we have a whole nother category of the spiritual side of all of this, in more in depth that, I think we're going to have to do that another time, but
yes, I really do want to do that with you.
Part two.
So just to have people show up, just show up. And sometimes it was just that unspoken, nothing, just sitting there and looking at each other and holding of a hand. That's it. There, nothing needed to be said.
Right.
And I had friends who were long distance who could do that just by sitting on the phone, and just, they weren't saying anything. I could just hear them breathing, and that was enough. It was enough just to know that they were there. They couldn't do anything from where they were, but they were there.
Right.
I feel like the one thing that's the cure for everything is love. I just feel that. I feel love is the cure for everything. And I think that it's important to just love each other. I said to you on the phone the other day, I really feel like we're all just kind of walking each other home to God. And the best way that we can honor God and each other is to be there for one another, to love each other, just love each other, especially now, especially
At the end-
now,
at the
how
end
we
of the
live.
day, that's why we came. At the end of the day, that's really what we came to do, is to, I think, be in these situations, learn these lessons, but not just learn the lessons. It's how we approach our adversity, how we approach the things that feel difficult, and how through those trials and tribulations we show up for other people. How do we show up for other people? Not, in spite of it, but maybe because of it. Or, I mean, it's all of it is, we were meant to do this together. We were meant to be here for one another. You said it beautifully. It's all about love. I agree.
Yeah, and I don't know how much time you wanted to spend on any of this, but I do want to run some statistics by you because I think it's important for your listeners and your viewers. As I said earlier on, heart disease is the #1 killer of Americans in this country. It's one person dies every 36 seconds in the United States. And I didn't know that. And that's a pretty strong statistic. It's about 655,000 Americans each year die from heart disease. It's 1 in 3. It's 1 in 3 people. And I thought about that one day when there was 4 of us girls sitting at a table. I said, I'm that, or there's 3 of us sitting at the table. And I thought, I'm the 1 in 3. I'm that one. And never did I ever think that I was that one. I never did. We always think that heart disease is the middle-aged, overweight guy who smoked a lot, ate bad food, and didn't take care of himself. And it's not. It can be young, healthy people with underlying medical conditions. Like in my case, I had this genetic disorder. Sometimes it's babies born with hyperplastic left or right heart syndrome or other heart defects. It can also be a virus that attacks your heart. And I didn't know that either. You can get a virus. I have a friend who ended up needing a heart transplant because he got a virus in his heart. So we need to be aware of that. It can be a preventable disease if we can avoid heart disease if you don't have any of those other underlying conditions by, like I said earlier, eating better, exercising. Don't smoke. If you're smoking, stop smoking. The other thing that I wanted people to understand: stress. Exactly, stress. Diabetes, being obese, an unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, and excessive alcohol use all contribute to heart disease. It's really important. I think we need to pay better attention to that. I think that people just seem to think, well, I'm not the face of heart disease because I go to the gym every week, or I'm eating granola or whatever. It's a little bit more than that. We need to pay attention to that. And there's a lot of things that we can do to improve on it. There's a lot of things that we can do to help ourselves. Sure. Take a 20-minute walk every day, even if you don't want to go to the gym. And I know a lot of people right now, especially with COVID, drinking more water, getting enough sleep. All of that's really important. For patients who are diagnosed with heart issues, I know that another thing that I'm seeing a lot of and getting a lot of calls about is atrial fibrillation. A lot of people, it can be a disease of aging. Like some people say that it shows up later in life. I have a few friends that were diagnosed this past year. So it's important to pay attention to that and to see your cardiologist. There are also some great devices that are out. I wear an iWatch. The Apple Watch came out with now that you can take your own EKG on your watch, which is fantastic. There's another thing, if people don't want to invest in the Apple Watch, there's another item called a Kardia. It's Kardia. You can look it up on the internet. It's usually like $79. And they do like a coupon every year too. That also can do a reading. If you are someone who is struggling with an arrhythmia or AFib, you can purchase that, and it does a reading that you can then send on your computer, right to your cardiologist. You can see the reading right from his office.
That's an app that will work on your Apple Watch? Is that an app?
No, it works with your phone. You put an app on your phone, the cardiac app right on your phone, and then
Okay.
you can send that reading that's on your phone right to your doctor.
Got it.
Yep. So a lot of things help. Like I said, diet, exercise, reducing your stress, drinking more water, yoga, meditation, a 20-minute walk in nature. All of those things are really important. And they're little.
Go ahead.
No, all of those things are really important, and they're little small changes that we can do to improve our life. Everybody always says we don't have any time. I don't have time for that. I don't have time. You have time for what you make time for. And certainly investing in yourself is the most important thing, And I say that to people all the time, because I think about what it would be like for your family to have the empty chair at the table because you didn't have enough time. Invest in yourself and make the time. 20 minutes, a 20-minute walk is a good investment in yourself.
And not only is it with regard to heart disease, but that is especially since it's the #1 killer. I mean, absolutely. But my gosh, if we were to do all of those things, help us feel better in every facet of our lives, for anxiety, for depression, for grief, all of it. Doing those things will just help us to live our most productive and joyful and happy life. That is, and be healthy and well, and that's really what it's all about, so that we can be there for other people, show up.
I think showing up, and I think that hope kind of anchors the soul. I think it giving hope to one another and just being there for one another. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think it's what God calls us to do. Is to show up, to be there, to help one another. If we just did that, how much nicer it would be, especially now. Even if we can't get together because of COVID, pick up the phone and call somebody. If you know somebody is living alone and they don't have someone, or if you know that someone's in a bad way, or they just lost someone, or they're struggling with illness themselves, a simple 5-minute phone call. I mean, we're so quick to text, and text is great, but text is not always enough. We need that
always convey the tone. It doesn't, there's no feeling attached. You can misread feelings on text also.
Oh yeah.
You hit on something that I loved, which was, just, connecting with people. When you know that someone else is in need, but it's also a wonderful tool and a wonderful idea to reach out and connect with other people when you're feeling that way. When we give other people what we want to receive, we're actually giving to ourselves. Have you ever been in a sad mood, or felt, and then for whatever reason, you knew that somebody else needed something, or you decided I'll call so-and-so for some reason, and then it ends up making you feel really good.
Best medicine.
Because you gave them what you needed to receive, and then you received it. So
I really feel like love is the cure for everything. And I know it sounds corny. I know, and I'm sure a lot of people will think that, oh, that's so corny.
It's true. Try it. Don't knock it.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And one of the things that I do to bring myself joy is I dance in my kitchen. I love to bake. I usually bake.
You call that edible love, am I right?
Absolutely. I say that my dream is to have a bakery, and I would call it, Love Made Edible. And I would employ people with special needs. That's my dream. I won the lottery tomorrow. That would be my dream. I would want to, believe it or not, because I ran this through my head. I've thought this through very well. I would want to buy the little Casson Road Elementary School that's been abandoned for years.
Oh, I love
And I would want to turn that into a huge farmer's market.
Oh, I love that. I can see that.
I honestly, and I would want to bring everybody there that I grew up with, if they wanted to do something, I would find something for everybody. There's always, for me at my table, there's always an extra chair for you. I don't, I love everybody. I love everybody. I'm at a point in my life where I want everybody to feel loved and accepted, because as a little girl for so long in my life, I didn't. And for me, the gift is in the giving. I love to bake and give it away. That's my thing. And there's a saying, they say, find whatever your specialness is or your special talent is and give it away. Something like that. I don't know exactly what the quote is, but something like that, like find what your purpose is and give it away. And so for me, it's in the baking. I play music. I listen to 80s music and 70s music, and I dance around in my kitchen, and I bake all these cookies. I pack them up. And even in COVID, I've done it. And then I'll call people or I'll text them and say, there's cookies. I put them out on a table or a chair out in the driveway. And I'll say, if you're nearby here, help yourself. Prior to that, before COVID, I would always have a boatload of cookies in my car, and wherever I went with containers of cookies, and you got them wherever I went. And it's the best feeling to hand over those cookies and to see the joy that it brings to people. The joy, or when they send you little pictures back, or they tag you on Facebook and they talk about how much joy it was for them. It just melts my heart, because I just remember as a little kid being in my grandmother's kitchen, dancing around with her. And if she made one apple pie, she made 12. And then we would take the apple pies across the street to Mrs. Snyder, and she'd give us her jars of canned tomatoes that she made, and we'd hand her the pie and she'd hand us the tomatoes. Yeah, like nobody does that anymore. So I want to continue to do that. I've COVID slowed me down a little bit, and then I had an issue. I think you probably saw my Facebook post where I had a chemical burn from mouthwash. So prior to that, I was working on a cookbook. My goal is to try to get a cookbook done, a gluten-free cookbook done in 2021.
You guys, you're gonna love that cookbook. If you got to follow Michelle on Instagram. She posts a lot of her gluten-free treats. They are gorgeous to look at. I'm sure they're insanely delicious too. And all right, so before we listen, are you guys listening and watching this beautiful face right here? Look, everything that you've been through, and listening to you talk about what brings you joy, which is giving and spreading love, is that's hopeful to anybody listening. It definitely makes my heart just kind of flutter, and it's beautiful in every way. I wanted to, and I'm going to give you the last word, but I wanted to read, there's a couple, but there's a quote that I found maybe on, that you cite as one of your favorite quotes. And it's on one of your pages, but this one goes like this: the will of God will never take you where the grace of God will not protect you. And you're a living example of that. And we've got so much more to talk about, and we're going to do that. But before we go, is there any final words that you'd like to share with everyone?
You can find me if you go to my website. You can find me on Facebook. I'm trying to think. I always forget my handle on Instagram, but I will tell you that if you want to follow and get.
You guys do want to follow and get.
Yeah, the recipe.
Trust me, I'm waiting for that cookbook.
I mean, I don't want, it's not for me to I'm not trying to do this to make money or whatever. I really want, if I sell the books, the money will go to charity. I mean, that's my hope. It would go, I would either donate it to Ehlers-Danlos, whatever monies I made off of it, the research for Ehlers-Danlos for a cure, or the Heart Association, because they're both, very close and near and dear to my heart. So if you look up, it's MISHS19 is my Instagram handle. MISHS, MIS like Sam, HS like Sam, 19. And I always share all of our recipes. I try to convert regular recipes. My husband's family is very Italian, and we took all of the family recipes because I was certain that I could get this right. If we were going to do Christmas cookies every year, I wanted them to be as good as grandma's cookies, but only gluten-free. And I think I mastered it. So I'm pretty pleased with how that turned out. And again, we always make them and give them away. Not this Christmas, the Christmas before, I made 350 pounds of cookies. After I was done making them, I couldn't even lift them. They were so heavy.
I've seen you put out these
So much
enormous,
fun,
these
and we
enormous,
ended up sending them to soldiers in Afghanistan, and then we just gave the rest away. It was,
ah,
I can't even tell you. It just was great. It was so great. I love doing that. I'm going to do more of that in 2021.
my heart. Well, again, I want to thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
Thank you
being
so much.
here. And before we go, we really, this has gone long, but I would like you to share your heart before we go. I think that would be a wonderful way to.
This
wrap
was
it
a Christmas gift from my husband. I'm trying to get it where you can see it. If you can actually see, it's laser etched with my wedding picture on it. It's from my wedding day. And then he inscribed the wedding date on the back for me as a Christmas gift. And it's one of my favorite things. And I thought I'd wear it today for the podcast.
Beautiful, and I love it so much. And I love everything that you shared. Your story is one is so compelling and one of filled with so much help.
And hope.
Help. I wanted to say hope, but I was already thinking of help. Hope, help, and just really great information. And I so appreciate you sharing with us today.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you do. I feel like God connected us too for a reason.
Absolutely.
You inspire me every day. You are my favorite post to read. I sometimes go back and rewatch your videos a second time because I enjoy them so much. And I just love your precious heart. So thank you for everything that you're doing too.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. And you guys, you got to stay tuned for part 2 coming soon. So on that note, I'm going to say good, wish you all love and peace, and sending you beautiful thoughts and protection. And we'll see you again soon. So take good care and have a great day. Bye.